Welcome to the series, The Power of Principle Thinking by Dr. Gerald Mann. Dr. Mann is the senior pastor at the Riverbend Church in Austin, Texas. Let's join Dr. Mann for more of The Power of Principle Thinking.
I've been doing a series of sermons called The Power of Principle Thinking. I think when life falls in, we need a reservoir of principles to draw on, and I think that was Jesus' whole philosophy of life. And today's principle is the one that I break the most. If you don't practice what I preach today, I have news for you. Neither do I. But I try, okay? So don't do what I do. Just do what I say, and you'll be okay, okay? The principle today is wait to worry. And I'm going to read from Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 25, what Jesus had to say about the whole subject of worry and stress. Do not be worried about food and drink, what you need to stay alive, or about clothes for your body. After all, isn't life worth more than food? And isn't the body worth more than clothes? Look at the birds flying around. They don't plant seeds or gather or put into barns, yet your heavenly Father takes care of them. Aren't you worth much more than birds? Can any of you live a bit longer or grow a bit taller by worrying about it? And why worry about clothes? Look at the wildflowers. They don't work or make clothes for themselves, but I tell you that not even King Solomon, with all of his wealth, had clothes as beautiful as one of these flowers. It is God who clothes the wild grass, grass that is here today and gone tomorrow and burned in the oven. Won't he be all the more sure to clothe you? How little faith you have. So don't start worrying, where am I going to get my food and clothes? These are the kinds of things that pagans worry about. Your Father in heaven knows what you need even before you ask him. Instead, if you're going to worry about something, worry more than anything else about the kingdom of God and what God requires of you. And then he will provide you with all the things you need. So don't worry about tomorrow. It will have plenty of its own worries. There's no need to add to tomorrow's troubles by worrying about them today. Wait to worry. 1979, in the summer, we started this little adventure called Riverbend with 60 people. My income was reduced by 2/3. I had 2 kids in college, 1 in the hospital, and a mortgage. And I had no idea how I was going to survive. We went that fall up to Lady Lodge at the beautiful retreat up there, and our retreat leader was a man named Fred Smith, Sr. He was in his late 60s by then. Fred Smith is quite a business phenom. He spends about 2 weeks out of each year with the board of General Motors and the board of Ford Motor Company and Chrysler and IBM, and he's well sought after for his business advice. He's a man that absolutely seems to have no anxiety level at all. He's the calmest, steadiest, or one of the steadiest people I've ever seen. I was in a real snit, as I usually am. We got out in the trees there from Lady Lodge and sat down on a bench, and I said, Fred, tell me, how do you deal with anxiety? Do you ever worry? I mean, you deal in millions of dollars, and don't you ever worry? And he said, no, I don't. He said, I don't know why, but somewhere, somehow, God gave me a little neon sign in my brain. And every time I start to worry, it starts blinking on and off, and it says, wait to worry. I said, well, explain that to me. He said, if I have to explain it to you, you're too dumb to understand it anyway. And he got up and walked off. Well, I started thinking about that. Wait to worry. What if you only worried when it was time to worry? What if you waited until it was time to really worry? And it dawned on me that worry is always connected to the future, to tomorrow. Worry has to do with what ifs and not yets and maybes. It has nothing to do with right now. And then I started thinking about what Jesus said in that passage that we read. And I had read that passage many times, and I went and read it again, and it dawned on me that was his philosophy. He didn't say, don't worry. I mean, if you're human, you're going to worry. You know that you're going to die. We're aware of death. You know that if you did something wrong in the past, it's going to have bad consequences in the present. I mean, to be human is to worry. So Jesus didn't say don't worry. He just said wait until it's the proper time to worry. And he gives 4 proper times to worry in that passage. First, he says wait until worry will feed and clothe you. Then worry. If worry will put clothes on your back, food in your stomach, then worry. He said, look at the birds. They don't plant, they don't farm. And look at the lilies. They don't spin themselves clothes. He said, don't you know you're worth more than birds? So, when worry will put food and clothes on your back, then start worrying. Until then, wait. In 1981, I almost died from worry, literally. I'm convinced of it. I know about heredity and all that, and my bad habits and all that, but worry almost killed me. As I said, started a new church, and I got into business. I'd never been into business, so I could support my family. And the first thing you knew, interest was 22%, and I owed almost $1 million, and I started worrying about finances. I did a deal with a guy who had plenty of money, but he is an expert in getting more of it by doing sort of shady, well, I can't use the adjective I'd like to, but bad deals with people. I got into it, and I saw that I had been had, and I started worrying. And I was angry, and I started working 18 hours a day to try to get out of it. And I said, I don't care if people need sleep. I don't need sleep. When I'd go to sleep, my fatigue level would get down. I'd wake right up. I was going to bed at midnight. I was getting up at 3 in the morning. I was working all day, and I was running against the wall and bouncing off and running against the wall and bouncing off. And one day I had chest pains. I went to my beloved doctor, and he stuck some dye and went around there, and he said, you're about to have a full-blown Fred Sanford deal. He said, you know, you got the big one on the front block. And I said, I'm 43 years old. This cannot be. He said, well, I don't know what can be and can't be, but you're about to die. And I said, I don't have time to be sick. He said, well, you got time to die. And so they zipped me open right quick, and when I woke up, I knew I was not in hell because I was too cold. They had lights on me warming me up. And I knew I wasn't in heaven because I was too darn sick. And I had something stuck down my throat for 3 days. I couldn't talk. Can you imagine a preacher not being able to talk for 3 days? I had to sit there and think. And then he sent me home for 6 weeks, and I couldn't even use the telephone. And I was stuck for 6 weeks, closed up. Could get out and walk a mile a day. And it was out of that process, after about 3 of those 6 weeks, that I began to think about how I got into that place. And I realized that I was worrying about financial things, about economic, materialistic survival. And I thought about those words that Jesus said, don't you know that you are worth more than birds? Don't you know that you're worth more than the grass that blooms today and is gone tomorrow? And I learned right then to wait to worry about financial matters. 2 or 3 years later, all of that had turned to gold, and I made more money than a preacher ought to, and I got a call from the Southern Baptist Convention. First time they ever called me. First time I'd ever had any money. They said, we want you to write an article in the Pastoral Magazine on economic independence for ministers. And I said, I'd be happy to, but I don't need much space. I'd write one sentence. Economic independence means to be totally independent of any worry about your economics. Period. That's it. They didn't print the article. Jesus says, wait to worry. Wait until it will feed and clothe you. I've never seen worry fill a man's belly or put clothes on his back. Then he says, gives us a second proper time to worry. He says, wait until it will make you grow taller and live longer. When worry will add to the quality and the quantity of your life, worry. Otherwise, wait. He said, you can't worry and grow 1 inch taller or live 1 day longer. Well, I got to thinking about that. What does worry do for you? It certainly doesn't add quantity and quality to your life. It kills you. By all estimates, worry doesn't do anything but diminish the totality of life. I read a story the other day I had never read. I had read stories like it, and I'd heard this limerick applied to a totally different situation, and the story is too good a story to be true. I mean, it preaches too well to be a true story, okay? It was about a guy named Willie Jones. Have you ever heard this story? Willie Jones lived in the early 1900s when they were discovering how bacteria and viruses were passed from one person to the next, and he was an industrial giant, made a lot of money, and he lived up in Detroit, Michigan, and he became he had a fetish about germs. He didn't want anybody around him that would communicate a disease to him. So he hired, it's like Howard Hughes, he hired people, with white gloves, and he wore a mask, and he stayed away from people, and he fumigated his house all the time, probably with DDT or something like that. But he absolutely became a crazy man. His only problem was he loved baseball. Now, this all makes sense if you'll just not go to sleep. He loved baseball, and that was his problem. He didn't want to be around people because he was afraid of germs, but he loved baseball. And so he bought a whole section of the stadium where he could sit and not be around people. And one day while he was watching baseball, he had a problem. He had to go to the bathroom. And so he sent his associates in there to clean up the bathroom and spray it and everything. He went in there. As he was coming out of the bathroom, a man walked in and stumbled right into him and sneezed. And according to the story, I told you it isn't true, it's a preacher's story. According to the story, he fainted. And he died of what they called acute anxiety. And on his epitaph, they wrote, "Here lie the bones of Willie Jones, for whom death held great terror. He lived germ-free and he died germ-free. No hits, no runs, no errors." I told you it's too good, it preaches too good to be true. When I read that, I thought, Jesus said, when worry will add one bit to your life, then worry. Otherwise, wait. Third thing he says is, wait to worry. Wait until you want to know how it really feels to be a pagan. Now, we have an idea of a pagan as being some, guy who eats raw meat and plunders damsels or something. But a pagan is simply somebody whose God is undependable. Pagans believe in God. It's just that their God is maybe there and maybe not there. A pagan is somebody who thinks he's got to face the world alone, that he has to look after his own well-being, and that he's alone against the forces of the world. Jesus said, when you really want to know how a pagan feels, then worry, because worry is a sign that you don't believe that God is present in your life. Worry is unfaith. It's a lack of believing that God is here with you. That's why we worry. I thought about that in terms of the old Adam and Eve story, and I never had thought about it in those terms before. Worry was the first result of a broken relationship with God. When they broke their relationship with God, they first got worried about their sexuality. So what happened? They had to put on clothes. Then they started worried about who was number one. Last night, as I was preparing for this sermon and watching the Texas game, everybody's number one. I thought, until they broke their relationship with God, they didn't start worrying about that. And then the man started dominating the woman. The woman had to start using her wiles and wills, and the battle of the sexes began. Until they broke their relationship with God, they never worried about their work. And now work lost its meaning. God said, you're going to have to now labor, and it will be drudgery to you. Until they broke their relationship with God, parenting was not a problem. Now they're worried about how their kids are going to turn out. To be separated from God is to worry. Whenever I catch myself worrying about anything, I have to stop and say, wait a minute. You must think that you're in this all by yourself and that you can't make it unless you look to your own devices. It's okay to worry, but wait until you want to feel like a pagan, because pagans who have an undependable God are the ones who worry. Fourth thing he says is, worry when you want tomorrow to be worse than it's already going to be. That's what he says. I love that scripture. That's literal. It says, worry when you want tomorrow to be worse than it's already going to be. Tomorrow's going to have a lot of trouble, he says. And if you want to make tomorrow worse than it's already going to be, then Add to it by worrying about it today. That's what he says. We have this statement, when people are worried, we say, don't worry, everything's going to turn out all right. Jesus said, no, don't worry, everything's not going to turn out all right. Tomorrow's going to have a lot of troubles. I'm aware of that now more than ever before. Yesterday I mowed the grass up and down the side of, I have a yard that's like this, and I mowed the grass, and I sweated a lot, and I almost died, and when I got up this morning to try to walk down the stairs, I thought it was the stairs that were creaking. It was my knees were creaking. And I looked in the mirror this morning, my hair was all sticking out, and gravity is finally winning. Big way. Everything. Do they have girdles for men? Gravity's winning. And I was thinking about something I read last week. It says if you're married happily, the national average is that one of you is going to live 16 years as a widow or a widower. That means that everybody in this room that's married will one day, most probably, bury your mate. And you'll have to go through that whole deal. And I thought, golly, you could keep thinking about that until you absolutely ran yourself crazy. Tomorrow is going to be filled with troubles. I feel sorry for people who get to old age and have never had to face one death, one tragedy, one inexplainable evil in the world. I feel sorry for people who plod through life thinking that the roof is never going to fall in. The roof is going to fall in. Jesus was right. Tomorrow will be filled with troubles. But, he says, don't worry about them today because you'll only make them worse than they're already going to be. And see, what he's trying to tell us is that God waits for us in the future. He's with us now, and he's with us tomorrow. And the God who is sustaining you today will sustain you in the future. A few years ago, I got a call from a friend in Houston, very prominent man, well-known, had served in the state legislature, was a steward in his church, had a wonderful family, man of unquestioned integrity, loved by everybody. And he said, tomorrow I'm going to be indicted for tax fraud. He said, I made a lot of money, and he said, I really don't know if I'm guilty or not, to tell you the truth. I told my accountants to avoid all the taxes they could. And I believe in tax avoidance, but we may have got into tax evasion. I don't know. He said, I do know this, that it's going to be in all the papers, and I'm going to be the laughingstock of my community. And he said, my wife is very upset, and for the first time our marriage is in dire straits, and even my kids are disappointed in me. He said, Gerald, my whole world has come to an end. And I thought, what can I do? He said, I'm sitting here with a gun in my lap. And he said, I don't know if I ought to take my life now or wait till it all hits the papers and take it later. And I thought, how can I help this man? And I just blurted out, the world has not come to an end. He said, you don't know how I feel. I said, I do too. I know exactly how you feel. You feel awful. The Bible says when the world comes to an end, that all of us who are believers are going to have the greatest day of our lives. There are going to be trumpets and bugles and angels, and the end of the world is going to be wonderful. The world has not come to an end. You feel too darn bad for the world to have come to an end. I said, what's come to an end is a chapter of your life. And I said, the only word I know to give you is wait to worry. Wait until they indict you. Wait until you get the lawyer. Wait until you get the lawyer's bill. Wait until you have to try to figure out how to pay the lawyer's bill. Wait till you're found guilty. Wait till the judge says you're guilty. Wait till you go through the sentencing and then pay the lawyer for the sentencing. But wait to worry. 2 years later, he went to trial. He was acquitted on all counts. Even some of the federal investigators that were prosecuting him were brought up for prosecution. He was totally exonerated. He called me, thanked me, and then I saw him not long ago, and he came across the room of crowded people, and he hugged me, and he said, I want you to know that of all the advice I got, those 3 words saved my life. Wait to worry. He said, I put them on the dashboard of my car. Wait to worry. I put them in my office. Wait to worry. I put them on the refrigerator. Wait to worry. He said, I even put it on the wall in front of the place I sit in the bathroom. Wait to worry. And he said, wait to worry saved my life. You tell people that the fear of facing something is a whole lot worse than the facing of it. I found that the God who had been with me all of my life was with me out there in the future. Wait to worry. Jesus does say there's one legitimate thing you ought to worry about, whether God is your king. That's the only thing you ought to worry about. Is God my king? How do you answer that? Every day I ask myself, is God really your king, or you just get up there and talk about it on Sunday? Who rules your life? And there are two answers to that. Who do you trust, and who do you obey? Not with your words, not with your doctrines, but with your life. When you spend your money, how does that show you who you trust? When you deal with people in your office or at work or at school, who do you trust? How does that show up? Do you trust in yourself or do you trust in God? Trust and obey is an old hymn. And those are the two measuring sticks of your relationship to God. So, when you leave here this week, you're going to do just like I do. First time something bad happens, you're going to pick it up, start worrying. Just remember, get the little neon light. Wait to worry. Tomorrow's going to be bad. Don't make it worse than it's going to be by worrying about it today. Worry if it'll feed and clothe you. Worry if it'll make you grow taller and add to your life. Worry when you really want to know how pagan feels. Otherwise, wait.
Thank you for joining us for the series, The Power of Principle Thinking. For information on other audio tapes or books by Dr. Gerald Mann, please call 1-800-388-9500 or write to Gerald Mann Ministries, Post Office Box 160-100, Austin, Texas 78716. You can turn the tape over now for the continuation of this series, The Power of Principle Thinking, from Dr. Gerald Mann.